Data privacy was a hot issue in 2018, especially after the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal came to light. What can we expect on this front in 2019? We're joined by Juliet Powell, author and founder of Turing AI. Juliet, great to see you. Happy 2019. I know some people are predicting there is going to be some kind of showdown on data privacy this year. The politicians are going to get serious in North America.
Well, I think that anybody that's been following the headlines for the last few years would probably agree with that statement. The question is, a showdown between whom and which organizations? And is the public going to be participant in that particular showdown? So one thing that I absolutely want to emphasize that I've said before, in terms of us as individuals, we can help protect our own privacy, for example, by using search engines like DuckDuckGo. That is basic personal privacy that we have in our own hands that we can do on an easy, a readily available basis. As for the other much larger battles that are going to be happening, well, that's something that we can all keep an eye on, but also keeping in mind that there are alternatives. So we've seen our privacy being showcased without our knowledge. We've seen data breaches across multiple organizations, especially when we talk about the FANG stocks. But particular to December of 2018, there was a statement that was released by Tim Berners-Lee, the guy that created the World Wide Web. Now, Tim came out saying this is not why we invented the internet. This data privacy, this secrecy, the selling of personal data is not why we wanted to create a World Wide Web. And as a result, he has invested, along with many people that are coming out of MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the idea is to create a platform that will sit on top of the current existing World Wide Web, so that any user has the opportunity to go through this new platform, be able to visit whatever sites that they normally surf and get information from, but it would go through this layer that is kind of a protective layer, so that your personal data would not be shared with the sites that you visit by all of the different bots that are following you around the web. Because even if you're not logged on to Facebook, for example, every time you like content, every time you rate content, that information is still creating kind of a decentralization of the web that most of us are not aware of. And again, more data breaches, more data leakage that are coming from the various apps that we decide to add to our phones, whether it's Android or iPhones. It doesn't really matter at this point, though I must say that iPhones definitely have much better protection than a Google or an Android phone, for example, for the simple reason that Apple's business model is not about selling data. It's not about advertising. So they're much better at security. But nonetheless, we as individuals have to be aware and take that battle into our own hands where we can. On the bigger scale, as I said, companies like Facebook will be confronted not only by scandals, by litigation, but also by their own users. And so this new opportunity offered by Tim Berners-Lee and his collaborators not only offers users a chance to change the system, but also, I think, while we see more and more companies that are suffering the same kind of lack of ROI because of all these breaches, I think we're going to see enterprise jump onto this new platform where you can actually create your own data store and decide who gets your data, who doesn't get your data.
That's
so
interesting.
I think security...
I was just going to say, because, I mean, it seems a bit far-fetched to expect that Google and Facebook will voluntarily make significant changes because their business model is all about harvesting our data.
Right. Right. Whereas Apple's is not. And again, the founder of the World Wide Web, I don't think has any other agenda than creating a platform that we can all use. And the whole idea was to be able to increase, yes, freedom of expression, but also collaboration. The more information that we have, the better we can be as a human population. And that's where he's coming from. So I agree with you. Facebook, Google, Amazon are not necessarily coming from that particular perspective, but 2019 will see us with more choices, and that's incredibly important.
I love this story that's out there that apparently the Silicon Valley gang are anxious for Washington to pass a privacy law because they think their lobbyists can manipulate that process much more easily than they can in California, and they're terrified that California will pass a tough privacy law that will become the default.
Well, as you know, currently California does have a much tougher privacy law on tech companies than the rest of the United States, but it is nowhere near the data privacy that we're seeing in the EU,
right,
which really isn't even protection enough at this point when you look at the underbelly of what's actually going on through our daily use of data, and it's capturing across the board. So this is not just corporate, this is also institutional, and this is government.
Yeah, that's fascinating because Europe did pass that big law, and I mean, it was a huge measure. It was the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, and it gave consumers clear rights. And of course, Facebook and Google are famous for those multi-page disclosures, well, that nobody reads.
And that change all the time, even if you were to read it, is the reality, right? So this is, again, where Tim Berners-Lee's idea really comes into play. I think more and more, because we're aware of this, more people are likely to buy into the idea of a personal data store where you can control not only who has access to your data, but also whether you're going to get paid for your data. And we're not just talking about rebates, we're talking actual cash in your bank account. And there was just the study that was published in December, I don't know whether you had a chance to see this, where two different groups of economists decided to join forces because they were doing essentially the same research, which is to figure out how much value Facebook has to users. And so in two separate studies, they were able to determine that users were willing to pay over $1,000 a year not to have their accounts deactivated. And this is post-Cambridge Analytica. This is post all the election kerfuffles. I mean, this is part of our reality. How much value do we think Facebook brings to us as opposed to what would we lose if we didn't have Facebook? So this is more of a social conversation, I think, than a political one or even a technology one. What do you think?
You know, that's fascinating. We have to look inside ourselves. We expect the internet to be free, but there's a cost. And I love that Tim Berners-Lee story, that he's working on this thing, overlay that would be private. It's like the dark web for those of us who are uncool and aren't interested in arms dealing and stuff like that. Anyway, Juliet, we got to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed. Juliet Powell, author and founder of Turing AI.